All right. Hey folks, how's it going? Today I'm just gonna build some trees. They're fun. Hopefully a little bit more exciting than my grass tutorial. Um, it seems like it's complex. It really isn't. It's just knowing how you build from the bottom out, the inside to the outside, how you understand what you are painting, um, and trust your hand. You trust that you're how you approach this. So sometimes it's really about you lay down your basic silhouette and then you start building from there. So that means that you start thinking of different colors to round out your silhouette, and then you end up going in there and you start taking your fine brush to it and detailing things a little bit more. Sometimes you need to erase or carve things away, um, and you start to define the shape more through that. It's a process, but you're painting as you think of it, and sometimes the way that thought needs to happen is you start from something basic and your basic understanding of something, and then you're refining your thought and refining it. And it's the same thing with everything that you paint, that you need to keep on building on top of it and coating it, and then you eventually get to detailing, and you'll see it come together. You know, the worst thing you can do is paint something like you think it needs to be perfect right off the bat. Plan it and lay down your gesture, lay down your solid shape, your silhouette, and build off of that. It's the strongest way you'll be able to do anything. Um, and yeah, so this is the tutorial on me painting trees, and so let's get at it. All right, so super late, but I feel like painting a tree. I'm going to show you a technique of how I like to paint trees. I mean, usually I'd start with, I have an illustration here of an outline of the design of this tree and everything like this. But this one I'm gonna kind of just gonna go with the flow a little bit, so that you guys have a reference for this. This one's gonna be a bigger tree than these ones that I've already sort of built, and something a bit thicker. So I want this one to be super heavy and nicely gnarled. I like broken shapes when it comes to trees, and what I mean by that is just blocking, tons of blocking. So you end up having something that's really nicely gnarled to start with. And so this is sort of just the general shape that I want. Obviously, I'm just kind of very loosely blocking this thing out. You know what? I'm going to shrink this down just so that you can see how it fits into this actual whole shot. This tree is not actually going to be in this shot in my film, but I really want to want to show you how it fits into an environment, and no better way than to fit it into this one that I've already kind of somewhat built already. So all I'm doing right now is I'm just building a really basic silhouette, which I'll build upon at some point later too. I don't want to get necessarily all the branches in and overcomplicate this particular step at this point. I just want to make sure that I have a good idea of where I'm placing everything, how essentially it's all going to work. And I mean, trees are interesting things. They have such interesting behavior because they obviously don't, they don't move in the way that we see movement right now, but every one of them is reaching for the sun, and then of course under the earth reaching down for water and things like that. and we want to show as much life as we can to this being. And so I'd love to really push that energy out. So I'm almost done with the silhouette of the skeleton of this thing, of this tree. And I'll show you some techniques on how I'd like to approach making trees. Once I finish with this, I'm going to go over it really quickly. I think it's good to put in more detail, layer and layer and layer, and not just layer over here. I mean, you're painting back to front, painting from within to outside, and all based on what you know about these beings. So see what we can come up with here. And I already know that this is going to be kind of an underbelly here, and there's going to be more on top of this. Yeah, there's something that has tons of life already. So roots are there, thick enough bark, made it its own thing. So this one overlay layer, and actually the under one, I'm going to keep slightly darker. You'll see why later. So I've just sort of locked the layers so I can paint within. I have one layer underneath that's such a color, and this one overlay. Now what I'm going to do is create a clipping mask. Using a dark color, I usually like to kind of paint these tips a little bit. You know, they're a little bit more sun worn and beat down, you know. Kind of as you're going through this, you're just placing colors in. You're sort of really working ambiguously until you get to the point where you're refining a little bit more in these things. So you'll see just exactly how loose I kind of tend to work with this stuff, where you're just placing little bits of color here. Now, I've sort of decided a little bit of where lighting is and where it's not. And so I want to start picking at the shape of this. And a lot of these trees have, you know, really broken bark. And so you're left with these kind of rectangular shapes that have certain flow. And all you're doing is trying to show how lighting is hitting this this structure. It's nothing major, just touching some areas here. May have areas where you just want to round out the shape, and we're going to get into how to really express that further. I mean, obviously this doesn't look anything close to being realistic or whatnot, but that's painting. Do the same for some reflective lighting on this side. You don't want to overdo it, but just touch these areas a little bit, and you're just getting a general sense of the the rounded shape of this structure again. Like anybody knows, you get different mixes of colors splashing around in any object, really, because it's how lighting reflects. It's how it's not just lighting. It's not just reflecting the lighting of something, but it's reflecting the colors that all exist around it. And so you end up kind of splashing a lot of this stuff around. And it's really funny. You can start to see where this really begins to come to life. You may make decisions like there's going to be some moss around here, something like that, but now you can see that there's tons of life that's really starting to explode out of here. And so this is the technique that I like to use, where I have this one layer on top, this underneath, and I'll show you why in a minute. So this is just a quick way of doing painting to me for trees. So now I want to really carve out some of this. So I'll take this layer that I have that has all the effects on it. Should set an opacity to this. And the reason I set an opacity is so that you're making some mistakes in here, but you can go over them and set up some dark tones here and there, but you're not making anything overly too definitive until you've made all your decisions. And so in this, I'm just kind of really working the contours. And I think it's really important for trees that you do that, that you work your contours and start carving out what's been happening with this bark. And of course you can be quite loose about it, and it actually reads fairly well. As you can see, I mean, it's a little messy, but it works. Because all you're doing is you're just laying down some good groundwork to then build off of later on. And so when you go on top of this with your next layer, you're adding highlights and reflective lights and even cast shadows and stuff like that. Then we'll go over this with a texture. And it's messy, and that's nature's way. I think sometimes the less you attempt to try and do some kind of perfect painting with this, really the better off you're going to be. Because you need to be wild with nature sometimes. I love sort of these rounded shapes, and sometimes that's what you want to do, is really show the break that's happening here, and the contour, and how this tree's been twisting over time to get to its stature as it is right now. Most importantly, you really want to define what the angle is of some of these things. So I'll just throw some basic contours that are happening here, and then break them slightly. use whatever brush you want. Right now I'm just kind of using an airbrush, but sometimes I like to use the sponge brush because it has more of a defined edge to it. It'd be the same thing if I was, using watercolors with this. I'd use a fine brush and something that kind of really defines the space. You can really see how this tree is starting to come together. It's really nothing too crazy, to be honest with you. I'm not doing anything hyper accurate with this. You want to trust what you're doing, but also really feel the flow of what you're doing. That's part of the trust of it. So let's do a couple extra little features here and there. I'll kind of leave it at that. I'll add some highlights. You don't want to do too much. Just want to make sure that some stuff really pops out, and this is where you're getting a couple more finer details in there. Get a little bit of that rim lighting, some of the edge work that's happening within the bark. We're only a couple minutes in here, and you're already starting to see that this thing has got some pop to it. You want the same thing on the other side with some nice rim light happening. And you don't want to just paint on the outside. It's nice to kind of bring some of these shapes within. So you're seeing how it actually has contour, three-dimensional shape to it. Awesome. It seems like I think I need a little bit more shadow in here. Not too much yet. I just really want to define some of these spaces. And I'm going to show you a little texture thing that I came up with. Most of these things, unless you're doing a super close-up of it, you don't really need to see this uber accurate kind of texturing happening. But I'm going to show you something real quick. Just like kind of understanding what's happening within the bark, and so you get these basic shapes that I've already outlined here that seem to work fairly well. And then we're going to get into a little texture here. So the texture that I built, it's super duper basic, this bark texture. So I've made it, I'm going to copy and paste it up here. You'll see what it looks like So this is what it is. It's this texture that I've obviously copy and pasted a bunch of times in ambiguous ways and made it fairly big. I'm going to play it up to be an overlay. You'll see how this works. And of course, now I just parent it to the tree. And you have really basic texture laying over this. And in this case, it looks, obviously very almost abused. It's a little bit too strong. So I'm just going to pop the opacity down to 65. That works fine. All right, so there we have part of a tree. So now, same sort of technique I am going to use to build the leaves. Let's get this generic shape going. I'm just going to get this down a little bit so that I can show you the full-on shape of this thing within our painting here. So this will go in its own layer by itself. I like having little bits of energy to this, so it's a little offset shape. This is when we're going to build underneath everything. Cool. Get an idea. Tree is full. Let's break this down a little bit more so that some of these edges are more ambiguous and it's not like a completely flat shape. There, see, now we got our trees in some pretty good space. So let's start building on top of this one now too. Again, copy and paste. This one I'm going to make a little bit darker underneath. That's mostly the maybe a bit too dark. You can see what I'm doing is I'm giving this a bit of a gradual grow. So in case I decide to have some underbelly on some of these other things, it'll be there, but it doesn't need to be as strong as the base. So yeah, here we have this layer, clipping mask. So what I want to do is I want to start applying some little bits of highlights here and there. You don't want to make these things too broad. I mean, mostly because then it ends up ruining the scale of your project, your subject. I mean, you want to see that this thing has smaller leaves, kind of like how these are over here. So again, just touching up some areas here. Same thing goes for the other side of it. A little bit of some reflective lighting. Nothing too crazy. And then we can pop in these little bits of color here, bits of dead leaves that are around. Come together. And we'll see what this looks like when I start to pick at some of the underbelly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take take one of my brushes. Let's take a speckled brush. See how that feels. I love the energy of some things. So now we're doing that same thing as before and just kind of building our general shapes. What's there? Love doing this kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Now also what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of what the color was here for our branches and just kind of add it to the underbelly. So this nice warmth that's happening beneath. Nice warm color. What we're going to add to the base of this is top of this. I'm going to add a bit of green to get some blending happening. Some of this will be separated momentarily, but now you can see how this tree is really starting to come together. So we can go back up in here and start making some choices on some more lighting. And this I just want to speckle. Now we're getting into some finer details. The reason for this is that we want to show leaves, but we don't want to over detail everything all the time, because then it becomes a little distracting. And the most important thing that you can put into your paintings is energy, not necessarily the accuracy of every little bit of line that you think you need to pop in there. That's a bit too yellow. Let's try some nice greens. And I usually paint with an opacity so that I'm allowing myself to make some decisions on just the subtleties of things without overly splashing too much color in. In this case, I'm not going to texture this one. I really want this to be its own beast of ambiguity. You don't want to show textures of necessarily of all these leaves. It's kind of much better that you leave it open. But you can do things like, let's say, I want to do small things like this. You see kind of these cartoony sort of leaves popping around. That's okay. Let's see. And the funny thing about this is actually all about lighting. You're showing how light is hitting something rather than defining what the object is. You're just seeing these little speckled bits of light hit. And it's important to kind of note that, I think. So it gives it just so much more depth. And so you would do the same thing if you're doing any watercolor paintings or acrylics and things like that. You would start with doing your wash layers, defining your space, and then going in and working on top of it a bit more if you need to. And with more details and finer brushes. And you can really literally do it quite easily this fast. And live with your mistakes. Most importantly, actually live with your mistakes. So it's always a learning process, which is great, actually. So yeah, there we kind of have our tree. Go over top of this with some more exterior highlights here. Something pretty loud, extreme. So we get a little bit of three-dimensionality happening here. These would be, in natural painting, you would be just using finer and finer and finer brushes. In Photoshop, I'm just changing the scale of these brushes, and that's fine enough. I'm just kind of lightly picking at some of these areas. You don't want to entirely overdo it. That works, and you got your tree. So, in that, as you notice here, I have this this whole layer put together here for this is my entire tree. So I'm going to group this now. I'm going to do a little experiment here where I'll take a duplicate of it, and what I'm going to do is I just want to kind of eat at some of this here very lightly, so we don't have such hard edges right into our tree. It really helps to kind of ground some of this stuff, get it sitting in the tree. Therefore, it becomes one bigger piece, a little bit better. And one thing I want to do on top of this, now I'm just going to create a little bit of a speckled shadow. Usually shadows, you get some kind of cools. I'm going to use, let's see what a cool green will look like with multiply on it. Let's start with hard coloring. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to use this green right here. So you'll see what I'm doing is I'm just kind of getting a nice cast shadow here. I want this to run right down the tree, let's say. It's not going to be that dark, don't worry. I'm just really defining, I just want to be able to see really clearly where my shadow will lie, and apply a bit of opacity to it. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take parts of it away. So if you'll see, get that really nice sort of speckled look, as if this thing was, you know, it's in a forest. And so what you want to do is make sure that the leaves are showing through in the shadows. I think that works. In fact, I do the same thing to this to a certain degree. This is how I just kind of like to play. I like to play with these things and see how it fits. I'm going to do a multiply layer here too on this entire object here. Do this so that we get this rounded kind of shape here. This is where you can kind of use your airbrush too, just to lightly touch up some of this so it's not too aggressive. Same here. Not too aggressive. And one last thing that I always like to do is just to ground this, pop some grass blades in here, or erase away from what is there. Cool. Good. If I really need to, I can pop another shadow underneath. See how it looks. Sure. Yeah, so there's a tree. If you feel like you need to fix up any of this stuff. Sometimes I like to play with this where, again, same old type of thing. If feeling like it's too vibrant, take a pass at it and see how you can play with certain lighting. See if you need to make it recede more. Play around. You let me know how you feel about it. Let yourself know how you feel about it. Yeah, anything can work. So yeah, best of luck making your trees. That's kind of how I do mine. Of course, you can go in further in detail as much as you need, but this is what works for me. So yeah, good luck. Good luck with your environments. All right, I'm glad we had her there. That tree was all right. I could probably do better, but yeah, that's how I kind of approach this stuff. Never too attached to it, but that's my technique, and I think it's a fun way to paint sometimes because you're doing it in layers, and it allows you to kind of break away from having to be completely creative all the time. And then you can come back and do some technical things and add little bits of stuff here and there. And then you get back into the technicals. And I think it really brings a lot of life to your paintings. And a lot of energy to it, and a lot of understanding of how lighting works and how mood works and all sorts of stuff like that. So, good luck with your paintings, and I hope you all do very well with them. I hope this is of service to you. Everybody has different styles. This is mine. There's lots more you can add to it lighting wise, but this kind of lays out how you go about that. If you want to add more, this world's your oyster, right? So anyways, good luck, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Take care. Bye.